Have you ever noticed how silence speaks louder than any words you could ever say? When you stop reaching out, stop explaining, stop chasing, something changes in the air. The energy shifts. Suddenly your absence becomes louder than your presence ever was. And that silence, that powerful space between what was said and what's left unsaid, begins to echo in her mind. She starts to wonder why. Why did you stop? Why did you pull back? What happened to the man who once tried so hard? And that's when the truth hits her. Your silence has meaning. It's no longer about indifference, it's about strength. Most people think that silence is weakness. They think it's giving up. But silence, when it comes from self-respect, is power in its purest form. It's the kind of strength that doesn't need to prove itself. It doesn't seek validation or chase attention. It simply stands tall and lets the world realize what it lost. And women feel that. They sense that shift deep inside. Because the moment you go silent, it forces reflection. It holds up a mirror, not just to her behavior, but to her own emotions. Silence makes her question what she truly felt, what she took for granted, and what she didn't see when she had your attention. It's no longer about words, it's about energy. When you stop explaining, you take your power back. When you stop chasing, you let her see what life feels like without your presence lighting up her world. She begins to notice the emptiness where your energy once filled her days, the lack of your consistency, your curiosity, your calm. There's something magnetic about silence when it's born from inner peace. It's not cold, it's not cruel, it's controlled, it's quiet confidence. It says, I don't need to prove my worth to anyone. And that's what women find most attractive. Not loud arrogance, but quiet assurance. The kind that says you've learned to value yourself, even if others couldn't. When you go silent, she starts replaying moments in her head. The conversations, the texts, the small details she brushed off when you cared. She begins to wonder if she misread your heart, if she underestimated your value, if maybe, just maybe, she pushed away someone who was never meant to be taken for granted. That silence plants seeds of realization that no argument, no explanation could ever achieve. This is the beauty of restraint. The world teaches you to react, to explain, to fight for understanding. But silence breaks the pattern. It disrupts the noise. It makes people notice what they refused to see before. Because silence is not the absence of emotion, it's the mastery of it. It's the moment you decide to protect your peace more than your pride. And that kind of strength, that unshakable calm, leaves an impression that words never could. So if you've gone silent, not out of bitterness, but out of growth, understand this, she feels it. Deeply. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually. Because the energy of self-respect always returns as gravity. It pulls on her thoughts. It lingers. It reminds her that not everyone stays when taken for granted, and not every man breaks when ignored. Stay with me until the end, because what you'll discover next will change how you see silence forever. You'll learn what women truly feel when the noise fades, and why your quiet strength might just be the loudest message you'll ever send. Silence creates space for truth to surface. It exposes what words once buried beneath noise and emotion. When you stop speaking, she's left alone with the sound of her own thoughts. And that's when clarity begins to sting. Because silence doesn't just make her miss you, it makes her confront the reality of how she treated you. It makes her see the parts of herself she ignored when you were always there, trying, giving, understanding. She begins to feel the contrast between your calm absence and her own inner chaos. That's when realization hits harder than any confrontation ever could. There's something powerful about a man who can walk away without anger. It's not that he stopped caring. It's that he finally started caring about himself. That shift changes everything. It tells her you're no longer controlled by emotion. You're guided by self-respect. You're no longer chasing validation. You're grounded in worth. That calm detachment shakes something inside her because deep down every woman recognizes strength when she sees it. Not the kind that yells or demands, but the kind that withdraws and still commands attention. When you stop explaining, your silence becomes a mirror that reflects truth more clearly than words ever could. It forces both of you to see the imbalance. It shows where effort was one-sided, where energy was wasted, where peace was sacrificed just to be understood. And once that awareness sets in, she starts to feel the weight of what she lost, not the man who begged to be seen, but the man who found his peace in being unseen. Your silence becomes her teacher. It teaches her that attention is not owed, it's earned. It teaches her that consistency is a language of love, and when it disappears, the silence screams. Every moment she once ignored now echoes louder. Every message she delayed replying to, every time she tested your patience, now returns to her as a quiet ache that words can't soothe. And the longer your silence lasts, the more powerful its message becomes. Not because it's a game, but because it's truth wrapped in restraint. You see, silence is the highest form of emotional intelligence. It's not about pretending not to care. It's about refusing to waste your energy where it's not appreciated. It's about standing in your own strength without seeking approval. The world may tell you that you have to fight to be understood, but real power is when you can walk away knowing you gave your best and still choose peace. That's not giving up. That's evolution. And women notice that evolution. They may not admit it, but they feel it. They sense when a man has detached from need and found power in patience. It challenges their ego, but it awakens their respect. Because silence is rare in a world obsessed with noise. It's rare to meet someone who can hold back words and let self-worth speak instead. When you go silent, you stop chasing her validation and start creating gravity. Your energy becomes grounded, stable, and magnetic. You no longer pull from desperation, you attract from alignment. That's when she starts to realize that your silence isn't punishment, it's presence. A deeper kind of communication that says, I value myself enough not to beg for connection. And that message, spoken without a single word, becomes the one she never forgets. Silence is the ultimate test of emotional strength. It strips away every mask, every performance, every illusion of control. When you go silent, there's no more pretending, no more chasing, no more trying to make someone see your worth. It's just you, standing with your truth. And that truth has weight. It carries the kind of calm that unsettles others because it can't be manipulated. It can't be swayed by attention or guilt. It simply exists, unapologetically. That's the moment when she realizes she no longer holds the same power she once did. The dynamic shifts completely. Your silence has redrawn the lines of respect. When you stop speaking, it's not the end, it's the reset. It's where energy realigns and boundaries rebuild. She starts to feel the emptiness that your voice once filled. Every unread message, every unspoken word, now lingers like a shadow of what was lost. But this time, you're not waiting for her to understand. You've already found understanding within yourself. That's what makes your silence so magnetic. It's not revenge, it's revelation. You've realized that peace is more valuable than attention, and maturity means walking away from what disturbs your spirit. Women feel that shift deeply, because silence is a mirror that reveals what presence used to hide. It shows her whether her interest was real or just comfort, whether her affection was love or control. And when your silence is grounded in confidence, it reminds her that real connection can't be forced. It must be earned through respect, not reaction. That realization often comes with a sting, because it exposes how easily she assumed you'd always be there. But you're no longer trying to be needed. You're choosing to be valued. There's a quiet dignity in that choice. It's the difference between reacting and rising, between explaining and evolving. You've stopped chasing closure from others because you've created it for yourself. That's what women don't expect. They expect you to reach out, to explain, to break the silence first. But when you don't, it forces a confrontation, not with you, but with themselves. It forces them to question why your peace feels louder than their attention. And while she wrestles with her thoughts, you grow stronger in yours. Every day you stay silent, your emotional gravity deepens. You begin to see how unnecessary the noise was, how many words were wasted trying to prove what time eventually revealed. You start to understand that silence is not emptiness, it's refinement. It's the sound of self-control, the echo of self-worth, the presence of power. You no longer need to be understood to feel whole. You've become complete by simply being grounded in truth. That's what truly shakes her. Because deep down, every woman wants a man who can master his emotions. A man who doesn't beg for attention, but commands it through presence. A man who doesn't argue for love, but embodies it through peace. When your silence holds that kind of maturity, it doesn't just make her think, it makes her feel. It makes her aware that your energy isn't easily replaced, that the calm you carry is rare, that losing your attention isn't losing a conversation. It's losing connection with something steady, something real. And that's the quiet power of going silent. It's not about walking away to hurt someone. It's about walking toward your own strength. It's about realizing that peace will always be louder than chaos, and self-respect will always speak clearer than words ever could. When your silence comes from a place of self-awareness, it no longer feels like loss. It feels like liberation. You begin to understand that not every connection deserves your energy, not every response deserves your time, and not every situation deserves your peace. You start realizing that silence isn't about winning or losing. It's about stepping back from anything that disturbs your alignment. And when a man reaches that level of emotional clarity, everything around him begins to shift. The noise fades, the drama loses its grip, and for the first time he sees how powerful restraint really is. That power doesn't come from ego, it comes from mastery. The ability to stay silent in moments where others would react is the mark of someone who has learned the difference between emotion and control. Women recognize that. They feel it instantly. They know when your silence isn't coldness but strength. Because silence born from peace carries a different vibration. It's calm, unbothered, unshakable. It says, I no longer need chaos to feel alive. And that kind of silence unsettles anyone who once fed on your attention. She begins to sense that the silence isn't temporary. It's intentional. It's no longer about waiting for her to reach out. It's about you choosing peace over explanation. That choice triggers reflection in her mind. She begins to question her own behavior, her patterns, her words. She starts to wonder how she became the reason for your distance, because deep down, she knows your silence is not accidental, it's the result of clarity, and clarity always carries truth. You've reached a point where you no longer crave being understood. You've outgrown the need for constant reassurance. That's what makes your energy magnetic. Because real strength isn't loud, it's calm. Real confidence doesn't need validation, it creates presence. And when you embody that, women can feel it on a level that transcends words. They start noticing that you no longer respond from emotion, you respond from peace. And that peace is intimidating, because it means you've taken full control of yourself. There's a moment in every man's life when he realizes his greatest power is not in how much he gives, but in what he chooses to withhold. When you stop giving your energy to what drains you, you naturally elevate yourself above it. You stop trying to fix what doesn't want to grow. You stop chasing people who are comfortable with losing you. And that silent withdrawal becomes the loudest declaration of your worth. The truth is, silence demands self-trust. It requires you to believe that your absence will speak the message your words never could. And it always does. Because silence leaves space for realization. It allows the other person to see the full picture without your interference. It gives them time to feel what you once carried for them, and to understand what it means to lose that kind of presence. That's why silence isn't weakness, it's wisdom. It's patience mixed with power. It's emotional discipline at its highest level. Every time you choose silence over reaction, you're rewriting the story of your own strength. You're proving to yourself that control is not about holding others, it's about holding yourself. And when you reach that state, nothing and no one can take your peace from you. Because you finally understand silence is not the end of connection. It's the beginning of self-respect. Silence becomes your filter. It separates what's real from what's convenient, what's loyal from what's temporary. When you go quiet, you start to see who truly values you, not for what you give, but for who you are when you give nothing. It's in that stillness that the truth reveals itself. The people who cared only for attention disappear. The ones who respected your energy stay curious. And she, the one who once took your presence for granted, begins to realize how much that presence actually meant. Because silence doesn't erase your impact, it amplifies it. It forces her to feel the difference between being wanted and being remembered. She starts to sense that your silence carries boundaries, that it's no longer an invitation to play with your emotions. It's a statement of self-worth written in unspoken words. And as she sits with the quiet, she feels a discomfort she can't name. It's not guilt, it's recognition. Recognition that she once had something rare, a man who cared without conditions, who gave without manipulation, who stayed without demands. And now that he's silent, she feels the contrast between your peace and her uncertainty. That contrast speaks louder than any confrontation ever could. Every second you stay silent, your energy becomes more defined. You are no longer part of the noise she used to control. You've become the calm she can't escape. That's the moment your silence turns from absence into presence. It becomes a force, because true power doesn't announce itself, it's felt. And she feels it every time her mind drifts back to you. Every time she wonders why the quiet feels heavier than your words ever did. Every time she questions why your distance has more gravity than her attention. You begin to realize that silence isn't about making her chase. It's about making yourself whole. It's a reclamation of emotional freedom. You're no longer operating from fear of losing her, you're moving from faith in your own value. That inner shift changes everything. Because when you stop needing validation from anyone else, you become untouchable. You start radiating an energy that says, I'm complete with or without your approval. And that's what women respond to at the deepest level. Not your words, not your pursuit, but your peace. There's something profoundly attractive about a man who can detach with grace, who doesn't argue, doesn't justify, doesn't explain. He just withdraws into silence and lets his energy speak. That level of composure signals maturity, and maturity is magnetic. It draws respect even from those who once underestimated you, because silence communicates one truth they can't ignore. You've evolved. You're no longer reacting to what hurt you. You're rising above it. And when she finally realizes that your silence wasn't punishment but protection, something shifts within her too. She starts to understand that you didn't walk away to teach her a lesson. You walked away because you learned yours. You learned that peace costs less than chaos, that you can't build love on confusion, that real connection can only exist where mutual respect is present. So when you stay silent, you're not disappearing, you're transforming. You're becoming someone who no longer needs to prove their worth through noise. You're stepping into a level of strength that doesn't shout, it radiates. And that, more than anything you could ever say, becomes the moment she finally understands the power of your silence. There's a moment when silence stops being uncomfortable and starts feeling sacred. At first, it's hard to sit in it. The mind races, the heart wants to reach out, and every instinct screams to fill the space with words. But when you resist that urge, something shifts. The noise fades, the emotions settle, and what's left is a clarity that words could never give. You begin to see how much energy you used to waste explaining yourself to people who were never listening, chasing understanding from those who only cared when it served them. Silence becomes your protection from all of that. It's where your peace rebuilds itself from the ashes of overexertion. For her, that silence feels unfamiliar. Because when someone's used to you reacting, your stillness feels like distance. It confuses her. It challenges her perception of control. She starts to realize that your silence isn't weakness, it's awareness. You've stopped operating on emotion and started moving from understanding, and that change makes her feel something new, respect mixed with curiosity, because while noise demands attention, silence earns it. It's not passive, it's powerful. It holds the weight of boundaries, the certainty of confidence, and the quiet dignity of a man who knows his value. What she secretly thinks in that silence isn't simple. There's confusion, there's reflection, and eventually there's recognition. Recognition that the energy she once took for granted is now gone. That she no longer has access to the emotional depth you offered so freely. She begins to notice the absence of your steady presence, the calm you carried, the way you once listened without judgment. The silence doesn't just remind her of you, it reminds her of herself. It shows her what kind of energy she invited and what kind she pushed away. And that realization doesn't fade easily, because silence has a way of lingering long after words are forgotten. For you, silence becomes discipline. It's not about ignoring her, it's about honoring yourself. You've chosen to rise above emotional reaction and step into emotional control. That control doesn't come from indifference, it comes from healing. It comes from the understanding that your energy is sacred, and not everyone deserves access to it. Every time you choose silence instead of argument, you grow. Every time you let go of the need to prove a point, you gain peace. And that peace begins to shape the man you are becoming. Calm, centered, unshaken by the noise around you. There's a strength in knowing you could respond but choose not to. There's wisdom in realizing that silence isn't empty. It's full of everything that matters. It's full of patience, reflection, maturity, and power. When you stand in that space, your energy becomes undeniable. You stop chasing validation and start radiating certainty. You stop waiting to be chosen and start choosing yourself. And that decision, made in silence, changes everything. She feels that energy even when you say nothing. Because real connection isn't built on constant communication, it's built on presence. And your silence carries presence. It reminds her that your worth doesn't fade when you stop speaking, it multiplies. Because in a world where everyone is loud, the one who can remain calm commands the room without saying a word. Silence is not the absence of power, it's the refinement of it. It's the space where you learn that not every reaction deserves your energy, not every loss deserves your pain, and not every person deserves your access. It's where you evolve from needing attention to embodying peace. And once you reach that level, you don't chase, you attract. You don't argue, you understand. You don't break, you become unshakable. Silence begins to reshape the way you see yourself. It removes the layers of insecurity that once made you chase, explain, and overextend. You start realizing that the right people never need to be convinced. The moment you stop speaking just to be understood, you begin to hear your own truth more clearly. That truth tells you something powerful. That peace is not found in being heard, it's found in being whole. You're not silent because you've lost your voice. You're silent because you finally learned the value of your energy. What she feels during your silence isn't just curiosity, it's contrast. The contrast between the man who used to give endlessly and the man who now gives selectively. The contrast between being pursued and being left to reflect. And within that contrast, she starts to recognize the cost of her complacency. Silence forces awareness. It shows her that attention is not infinite, and presence is not guaranteed. It reminds her that connection fades when it's not nurtured, and that no one, no matter how much they care, will stay where they are not respected. This realization hits deeper than words ever could, because words can be argued with, but silence cannot. It stands firm, unshakable, undeniable. It reflects truth without defense, emotion without drama. And when that truth comes from a place of calm strength, it becomes unforgettable. She may try to distract herself, convince herself she's moved on, but silence lingers. It stays in the pauses between her thoughts, in the moments when she wonders why you no longer react, why your energy feels different, why peace suddenly feels more powerful than attention. You begin to understand that silence is not separation, it's elevation. It's the space where you heal, reset, and realign, where you stop trying to control outcomes and start mastering yourself. You realize that the purpose of silence is not to make her miss you, but to make you meet yourself again, to remember the man you were before you overgave, to rediscover the strength that got buried under noise, emotion, and need. That man doesn't beg, he doesn't prove, he doesn't chase. He simply exists in quiet power. And that's what women find most magnetic. The man who no longer needs to convince the world of his worth. The man who can love deeply yet remain detached from outcome. The man who moves from calm instead of chaos. Because when a man's silence comes from inner stability, it communicates something no words can: control. The control to feel deeply without being ruled by emotion. The control to let go without resentment. The control to walk away without losing compassion. That's the kind of energy that can't be ignored. It demands respect, even from those who once overlooked it. Silence teaches you that maturity isn't about withholding love. It's about expressing it wisely. It's about giving where it's valued, not where it's wasted. It's about recognizing that peace is the highest form of strength, and distance can be the loudest form of communication. When you master silence, you no longer fear being misunderstood, because you no longer need validation. You become grounded in your own truth, and that truth radiates through your energy. So when you choose silence, you're not walking away from her. You're walking toward yourself. You're choosing clarity over chaos, power over reaction, and growth over repetition. And in that choice, something extraordinary happens. The world begins to respond differently. People sense your strength before you speak it. Women notice your calm before they hear your words. And suddenly, your silence is no longer emptiness. It's presence. It's confidence. It's the sound of a man who finally knows who he is. When you master silence, you begin to understand how energy speaks louder than any voice. You realize that you never needed to convince anyone of your worth. Your presence was already proof of it. Silence strips away everything artificial. It exposes what's real. It separates the people who value you from the ones who only valued access to you. And as you stand in that quiet confidence, you begin to see that the power you were searching for in validation has always been within you. Silence just gave it space to breathe. She starts to feel that difference immediately. The version of you that once chased, explained, and tried to prove your heart is gone. What remains is a version of you that moves differently, measured, composed, unshaken. That shift doesn't go unnoticed. Because women are deeply intuitive, they feel the change before they understand it. Your silence speaks in ways that words never could. It says you've detached from need. It says you've learned to give from strength, not from fear. And that kind of silence doesn't just create distance, it commands reflection. She begins to question not your love, but her own awareness. She starts realizing that she had something genuine, a man who cared with intention, who brought calm instead of chaos, who offered peace instead of pressure. Now, that energy is gone, and in its absence, she meets herself. She confronts the parts of her that took without giving, that received without appreciating. Silence forces her to feel what you once felt, the uncertainty, the waiting, the wanting something that no longer responds. It's not revenge, it's reality returning balance. Meanwhile, your silence builds something deeper inside you. It becomes discipline in motion. You stop seeking closure from others and begin finding completion within. You learn that the more you react, the more you hand away your peace, but the more you remain still, the more you reclaim your power. And that control, that emotional mastery, becomes your quiet revolution. It's what transforms pain into wisdom, loss into clarity, and rejection into redirection. Every moment of silence refines your focus. You start hearing your intuition more clearly. You start noticing who truly brings you peace and who disrupts it. You begin living by energy, not by attachment. That's what makes you rare in a world full of noise. Everyone's trying to be seen. Few are calm enough to be felt. And when you're felt, when your energy carries the weight of peace, you no longer have to chase connection. It finds you. Silence teaches you to let your absence speak where your presence was once ignored. It's not about disappearing. It's about elevating. It's about letting people realize what your energy brought into their lives, only when it's no longer there. That realization is powerful. It humbles egos. It awakens hearts. It makes people see that consistency, attention, and care are not endless resources, they are privileges. When a man embraces that truth, his silence no longer feels like retreat. It feels like authority. It's not avoidance, it's self-command. It's a declaration that says, I am no longer available for what drains me. And that message vibrates on a level words can't reach. Because silence is not empty. It's a statement of power, written in presence, delivered through peace, and understood by anyone wise enough to feel it. Silence teaches you a truth that most never discover. The less you react, the more power you hold. You begin to understand that not everything deserves a response, not every situation deserves your explanation, and not every person deserves your access. When you stop reacting, you stop giving your energy away. You reclaim your focus, your balance, your peace. And that peace becomes your most powerful presence. It radiates through everything you do, and people feel it, even without words. That's the beauty of silence. It doesn't need noise to make an impact. It moves through energy, not sound. She feels that shift more deeply than she can admit. Your silence becomes the mirror that reflects everything she didn't want to see. It's not that she suddenly forgets you. It's that she begins to see you differently. She sees the boundaries she once tested, now firm and unshakable. She sees the emotional strength that no longer seeks validation. And most of all, she feels the calm authority of a man who doesn't chase, because he's already found peace within himself. That realization creates a ripple of thought she can't ignore. Because when a man withdraws from reaction, the world around him starts adjusting to his new frequency. You start noticing the same thing too. The more silent you become, the clearer everything feels. Clarity replaces confusion. Strength replaces doubt. You stop needing closure from others because you've created it internally. The silence becomes a sanctuary, not a punishment. It's the place where your emotions breathe, your thoughts organize, and your perspective sharpens. You no longer act from impulse. You move with intention. That kind of emotional discipline is rare, and it becomes your new standard. You don't rise by force anymore. You rise through composure. Silence has always been misunderstood as weakness, but it's actually wisdom in disguise. It's the act of saying, I will not let chaos dictate my peace. It's emotional control, refined through restraint. And when you operate from that level, you become a man people notice without you having to announce yourself. Because real strength doesn't scream, it stabilizes. It doesn't argue, it understands. It doesn't compete, it attracts. That's what makes silence so powerful. It communicates without distortion. For her, your silence becomes impossible to ignore. It forces her to feel the consequences of her own energy. She begins to understand that silence is not indifference, it's reflection. It's the emotional feedback of someone who's done explaining, done proving, done carrying the weight of one-sided effort. And in that stillness, she starts realizing what your presence used to mean. She feels the peace you once brought into chaos, the steadiness you offered when things felt uncertain. Now that it's gone, she's left with the quiet reminder that not every man is replaceable, and not every silence is empty. The strength of silence lies in its permanence. It doesn't fade like words, it lingers, it builds anticipation, curiosity, respect. It turns absence into awareness, and in that awareness both of you grow, her through reflection, you through detachment. Silence becomes the bridge between who you were and who you're becoming. The man who no longer needs to prove himself through words, but through energy. The man who no longer fights to be seen, because his peace is proof enough of his growth.